I want to thank you all for coming. Thank Mike Welch very much for coming today. Mike is a retired teacher. He is a musician and he's a reenactor. For us at the museum, he's an amazing volunteer. He does guided tours. He helps with our very active education program. Most recently, he has started working with me. We're doing a revolutionary story time, one Thursday a month. And today, I asked him here today when I was thinking about our lecture series, because I remember a night at the tavern not long ago where I sat down with a reenactor and just wanted to understand what was going on, how these decisions were made, how much research went in, how much research didn't go in, and what got somebody involved in this. So I approached Mike and said, from your perspective, because they're all different. We have another wonderful reenactor here today, Bill, who also volunteers for us, so I'm sure he'd be happy to talk to you guys after. They're all going to have different experiences. It's something that from the outside, if you don't know anything about it, you really don't know anything about it, I found anyway. There's very little written about it. It's your own personal research more than a book that says, here's how to be a reenactor. So this is Mike's perspective and about all the wonderful things he's done. He does work in lots of different ways and he presents in lots of different ways. So he has a nice cross-section of experience from my experience with Mike. So I hope you enjoy it. And I'll hand it over to Mike. Thank you.
It's my pleasure, madam. And quite generous of you as well. Well, again, welcome to the tavern. And as Victoria just mentioned to you, I have been presenting various forms for about 10 years, which in comparison to some might be only yesterday, in others might seem like a long time. It does seem like a long time to me, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about my experiences. As we go through, I have some slides I'm going to show you, some pictures in the beginning, and to try to put it all in some kind of context. Because when someone says reenacting, it might mean one thing and it might mean something to someone else. There are a lot of different terms that you will hear used, and as Victoria mentioned to you, this is going to be my perspective. There is not one book that one who is interested in what we do can go out and purchase on, at Amazon or whatever. But so I'm going to try to give you my best take on how I got into it and how I happen to be where I'm at today, wherever that may be. So sit back, enjoy. If you brought a lunch, please go right at it. And if you have any questions, I will have some time at the end to try my best at answering them. Okay? Period of time, and second of all, reenacting. And I'm going to do my best to try to define that as we go on. Now, and I apologize, we don't have a large screen and it's as dark as I could make it in this room, so you may not be able to see too much of what's going on here. Generally, when you use the word reenacting, by definition, means to reenact something, usually a specific historical event. Now, the term does get broadened out and become generic. For example, what I'm doing right now, to some people might be reenacting because I'm dressed in costume. But generally speaking, it's a little more than that. And what you see in these two pictures is that I had the great pleasure of working together with a friend of mine here in the back, not too far away. We had a tarring and feathering. It was a reenactment of the, what was it called, the tree riot. There's some British surveyors who were coming into town back in colonial times, and they tagged trees, and people were very upset because even though the tree might be on your property, if it was claimed by the king or the king's surveyor, it belonged to the king and you had no say about it. And lumber was huge back in that period of time as a source of income for people. And there was a riot at one point where the king's surveyor was in fact tarred and feathered. So we attempted and did our best at reenacting this. And I'm not... Is that you, Bill?
I can't see
is that your coat?
Is that a candy stripe?
Yes.
No,
Yeah. Oh, it's not you. Okay, sorry. I know you were there that day.
Yes, I was. It was,
Because when the feathers started to fly, I took off my coat because most of them were landing on me instead of our intended victim. And I believe you held my coat for me at one point. My job was to hold the surveyor still while he was covered with tar, quote unquote. Of course, we didn't use real tar. But again, when you say tar, we think of what is used as pavement in the streets. That was not the intention in those days. Tar was basically pine pitch that was used from trees. We did not use pine pitch either, we used molasses. So very often in reenacting, we try to be as practical as we can, and also safety would become an issue, because if it was real tar, it would be heated and quite hot, and sometimes the victims would get severely burned. So we didn't go quite that far, fortunately. So that's more of what reenacting is, a specific event. Overall and generically, reenacting is a hobby. Very seldom do people actually get paid to do what we do. Most of us are volunteers. So it's a hobby for most people, and the participants are extremely diverse. They can be quite elderly, as myself, or very often children are involved as well. It's a full range, all walks of life, from professors, professional historians, engineers, doctors, school teachers, truck drivers. It doesn't matter what your actual 9-to-5 profession may or may not be. This is a hobby. Most importantly here, to understand is there is a huge spectrum across the world of reenacting. At one end, there is a word that is used, the word is FARBs. Another term that's used is Polyester Soldiers. These are people who really are very well intentioned, and their heart is in the right place, and they're usually very passionate, but they don't spend the time and effort to be as authentic as they possibly could. For example, I was in a parade not that long ago where I was dressed in as authentic of an outfit as I possibly could, and another gentleman was walking with me, and his outfit as a British soldier was quite lacking, and he would wear his hat, half sideways, and he just looking right and looking authentic was not real important to this gentleman. So those two terms, FARBs and Polyester Soldiers, generally are not used face-to-face with people. You don't call someone that generally, but it is a more of a derogatory term. So these folks are well-meaning, inauthentic. Their clothing might be anachronistic. Their fabrics might be the wrong fabrics. The fasteners, you might see Velcro, you might see zippers, things that just didn't exist in the time. Their footwear, they might be wearing Nikes. You might see them on some kind of a vehicle that didn't exist at that time. You might see them catching a cigarette on the side. And their weapons might be, weapons are like a whole nother lecture unto themselves. Now there's one thing, this keeps timing out on me. There is one thing about this picture. Can you look at this motley crew here in the picture and tell me what would make this particular reenactor as such out of place? Yes?
Is he wearing sunglasses? I'm not sure if I can see.
That sure is what he looks like, yes.
Okay, yeah.
They're actually not sunglasses, they're photosensitive lenses.
Oh, okay.
Okay, which also didn't exist in those days. So, this was about 10 years ago when I first got into it. My clothes, my weapon, and just about everything else you see in the picture are really quite close to being authentic. And yet the glasses stick out like a sore thumb. So when people see you, right, that's what goes. That's where your eye goes. It goes to that weak spot in your presentation. So,
Can I ask you, do
sure.
they have any kind of tinted glasses to help your eyes, or any kind of protection?
not to my knowledge. Bill, do you know if there were any kind of tinted glasses?
Rose.
They did have rose-colored glasses. You're right, I have heard of those.
Maybe that's where the term comes, look into the world.
Yeah, through rose-colored glasses, yes, everything looks
Okay,
good.
thank you.
Now, at the other far end of the reenacting spectrum, we have people that, you can call them anything, I suppose. There's no official word for these people. These are all just sort of slang within the hobby. And I've read that one term is progressive. These are the people that are the really hardcore, authentic people who dive as deeply as anyone can dive into the research. Sometimes this term is used, or a term that's used derogatorily here, they're known as stitch counters. Because unfortunately, what might happen, remember, these are all human beings and everybody's heart is in the right place and they're all well-intentioned. So on the one hand, you have a polyester soldier. On the other hand, you might have a progressive who is looking at things like, well, is that coat hand-sewn? If it is hand-sewn, how many stitches per inch are in it? And they will really get down to it. So if you go to some places, and I'm not sure it's on this slide, but a place like Plymouth Plantation, for example, the people truly do live that life. They feel that immersion is the best way to get as close as you possibly can to the real deal. So they spend their entire life as that, in that period, I should say. But they are known for their thorough research. The problem comes in balancing, I should say, in balancing the research with some practicality. Sooner or later it comes to the point where the research might say there's no way you can do what you want to do, and in other cases, you just do your best.
Will a progressive talk to a farm?
Generally, there are those, and we're, in some cases, I can't say I have ever met anybody that I couldn't get along with. And I think, generally speaking, the middle line is generally very practical in understanding. There might be they get, both sides get very proud, and the farm is going to say, but the important thing is to be here and support what we're doing and to teach and to educate. And then, of course, it just gets into a back and forth, and then the progressive is going to say, well, you want to teach people the right thing, don't you? You want to teach them what really was, don't you? And then, well, it goes back and forth. But generally, it's a friendly conversation, and it goes back and forth. But fortunately, the vast majority of folks, like me, are considered somewhere in the mainstream. So the vast majority of reactors fall into the category with a wide range even within that category. In and out of character, in the absence of an audience. In other words, when you people are not in front of me and I'm standing out there, then I can do anything that, out of character if I would like to. In and out of also the 5, or some people use a 10-foot rule, may apply. Now, what does that mean? You probably have heard this about other things. If you cannot tell from where you're sitting over here whether this coat is hand-sewn or machine-sewn, then it's good enough for what we're doing. Okay, that's the 5-foot rule or 10-foot rule. Food generally might be appropriate. What you're eating at a particular event might be appropriate, but maybe it's not what they would have eaten in that season or in that particular locale. Or they might not have had it for dinner, they probably would have had it for breakfast. So, you see where I'm going? Okay, so again, practical.
If you need someone to just keep it going over there, I can.
Thank you. I'll just try to tap it a little more often.
All right.
Put on a good performance for those that can see them. Again, if the audience is here, this is my presentation is to you, and do the best job I can. But if you can't see me, then it really doesn't matter. So what do you need to become a reenactor? Hopefully, more period glasses, like these. These are authentic frames. However, they are progressive lenses, but you can't tell that because I'm a mainstreamer. Okay? You can't tell that. However, they're not photosensitive, so I can wear them outside and they won't turn into sunglasses, so I'll still fit as close as I can to the part. Well, so my answer to this question, what do you need? Well, to what level do you want to rise in this hobby? Now, you're going to find that most of the questions that get asked in this hobby and in guiding and period work as well, the answer is usually, well, it depends. There's not a strict answer to most questions. So much depends on so many other things. So here I go. It depends. What level? How strict do you want to be? So you start with the kit, and then everything else, piece by piece by piece. In my opinion, the clothes is the first impression. It's the first thing you see. And if you start off with the clothes being out of whack right away, people are already questioning you. So I think that's very important. And it's the way I proceeded. I got my first outfit, which included this coat, and it included this shirt, and it did not include these pants. I have other pants and a different waistcoat or waistcoat. And they are, by the way, hand sewn. I was fortunate. I knew a person who was a costumer for a local theater company, a friend of mine, and she actually asked me if she could make an outfit for me, not the other way around. So I fell over backwards and I said, but of course you can. What can I do for you in return? So that's where I started. It was that vest and those pants and the shirt that I'm wearing. However, if you turn the vest inside out, or the pockets inside out, you will see that the lining was done by machine. Any place that cannot literally be seen, she did with a machine. But anything that could be seen, like all of these seams, are all hand stitched, and that includes the shirt as well. Uh-oh. Here we go. And let's try that again. Clothing and equipment. So now we were beyond the basic clothes, which, by the way, in the reenacting hobby, the clothes are referred to as the kit. You might call it the costume, but we call it the kit. Are you in kit or not? Headgear, your hats. Perhaps you're into wearing wigs. Eyewear, we talked about that. If you're going camping over the weekend, everything that goes into the camping, everything. And I've got some pictures about that too. And of course, the whole world of weapons, if you choose to go that route. Are they manufactured? If they're manufactured, are they manufactured by 1780, let's say, or 1770s manufacturing capabilities, or are they manufactured by today? If you get something with plastic in it, and it's stamped by modern machines, obviously that won't work. But they had flintlocks. They had a lot of machines, had clocks. So there were some things that were machine made. So again, you need to do your research and find out what is appropriate and what isn't. Today there is a cottage industry that has grown up, a huge industry, to supply reenactors, because reenacting and other performers are being seen more and more and more in many places. So it's really quite a business. And many things are handmade. So I was lucky enough to get some of my clothes handmade. I was lucky enough to have a little bit of background in doing reupholstery. So I can handle a needle and thread and a machine. So there are some things that I was able to make myself or change or adapt. I have a big great coat that I wear, the great big cloak with the collar. And I made it myself by going down to a local Salvation Army type store, and I found this beautiful green, country green wool coat, long wool coat, a woman's coat. I took it home and just pulled it all apart. Took the sleeves off it, sewed it all up so now you can't tell there were any sleeves there. Took a piece that I cut out of the sleeves and made a shawl for it, put a snap on. So anything I can make myself, I do make myself. If it doesn't come out perfect, well, if it was made by hand by the individual back in the day, probably didn't come out perfect either. So again, sometimes what we do in the hobby is that if you can't justify it in any other way, you say, well, I made it myself, just like they did in the 1770s. So I'm sure they made mistakes too. You're constantly running against a balancing act between cost Because if you go to the high-end suppliers and you really want to be authentic, well, then you have to have an actual antique from the 1770s. And of course, now you're talking thousands and thousands of dollars for a musket. Or you can buy replicas that work and look exactly like the originals, and maybe find something for, in the high hundreds or 1,000 or a little more. Safety. Shoes are a huge thing. The shoes I'm wearing, you might not be able to see them where you are replicas, and they were very authentically made, but they have leather soles. So I thought they were just great until I fell down the stairs in the other museum building last year, and I said, I'm not going to jeopardize my life to have appropriate shoes. So I still have the appropriate shoes, but again, you can't see it, so you don't know that I had rubber soles or patches attached to the bottom of them, so I wouldn't kill myself on these period stairs that we have in the building. There we go. Now, on the other side of things, and I shouldn't say the other side, this term of reenacting does get spread over very often into another area, if you choose to make it a separate area, and that's called living history. And that is where sometimes you will find the real people who dive as deeply as possible into the research. The difference here is that they're not reenacting a specific historical event. They are simply being a person in the time. And that's a living history performer. So a living museum is a type of museum which recreates settings, historical settings, to simulate past time periods, providing visitors with an experiential, and that's important here, experience, interpretation of history. It's a type of museum that recreates to the fullest extent conditions of a culture, natural environment, or historical period. And I just got that out of Wikipedia. I think it's a quite apt, in my experience, definition. There's no planned script in a presentation of the reading of declaration. There might be, they may have found some documents that said so-and-so said this and so-and-so said that, and they've got it all down, and you read an official document. Living history, there's no official script. It's meant for education. So you walk into an environment, and by witnessing that environment, hopefully you will experience what it might be like to actually live in that environment full time. They portray life. No battles necessary. A battle would more likely be found in a historical event. Crafts, for example, cooking, music demonstrations, all might be examples of living history. Professional actors could be involved, such as at Plymouth Plantation. Living history groups might have very high standards, such as Historic Williamsburg. In the pictures there, it's a little difficult to see, are two good friends of mine that I often work with. This is Jennifer Roy and her husband Greg, and she portrays an indentured servant and knows more history about that particular field than I ever will. Very, very knowledgeable, and to see her when she's fully in kit, she has bad teeth, and she's got soot, and she's barefooted and filthy, and she's just a wonderful, does wonderful portrayals of that persona. So if you're interested in getting into all of this, what is your goal? I'm kind of taking this approach today as if you were interested in becoming someone like me. Now, you may or may not be, I don't know. So I've just taken that approach to help explain it. Because I think it might help to explain the vagaries and varieties involved here. So are you interested in being a guide in a museum, for example? So you might dress in character and being a guide. And there's a picture of one such fellow up there. You're interested in doing musical presentations. You might just get involved in a certain kit, try to find period instruments, and of course the music of the period would be presented. Would you like to be an educator? Do you like working with children? Are you a teacher, a former teacher, retired teacher, like to work with children and try to bring them into a better understanding of what history is all about. Of course, what that means is you're going to schools or schools are coming to you. That is one thing we do here at the museum. Schools come to us and on occasion we go to them. And on one day, you might end up working with 120 different children in one day. And they come to you in groups, in small groups. And we do that here at the museum. We have a number of different reenactors who portray different crafts. Are you someone who is an avid history buff and you just want to give lectures, presentations, demonstrations? So you have to decide for yourself which thing that you are really passionate that you want to do, and then start moving in that direction. Unless you're like me, and that is where you just want to do it all. Okay, so and it is possible. Second thing, you need to decide where you're going to be working. Are you going to be associated within an institution, such as a museum? What are the guidelines that the museum may have that might govern what you do and how you do it? Are you going to be working with schools? Are there any laws involved as to your appearance in schools? Are there any, for example, we all need to have our, they used to call it a Corey test. They have another name for it now, where in order for any visitor to go into school, you have to have a background check. Are there any other laws? You have to consider safety. So outside of reenacting in history, there are other things to consider here. What town or what state are you going to be working in or talking about? Anytime I do an appearance in another town, I do my best to find out something specific, or as much as I can, about that specific city or town. A few weeks ago, I worked with a group of children who came on a nationwide field trip from Sacramento, California. And I did they were here for a whole week. They did a Freedom Trail and all, and I was brought in to do a demonstration on shipbuilding in Newburyport, for example. First thing I did was a few nights before, went online, and I got into Sacramento, and the ship we were building and I was talking about was a schooner. I was lucky. Guess what? I found a picture of a schooner on the Sacramento River right in front of their downtown. It's like a tour ship. So after we built the schooner, we talked about it. I said, so how many schooners do you think there are in San Francisco? No, there's not many schooners. I held up a picture. It just brings it all back to the kids. And this is what we as hobbyists here are constantly trying to do, is to make it come alive for people. When do you want to do, what period? By when, I mean, what period are we talking about? You need to choose a time period. Sometimes it can get very, very specific. There are those who only dabble in the French and Indian War, for example. So here's a picture of a bunch of us who got together, and our clothes, believe it or not, there's only about a 10-year difference, but the clothes might be different. So again, you have to decide what you want to do, where you want to do it, and when, what period of time. On the flip side of it, the picture on the right-hand side, the museum runs a ghost walk, if you want to call it that. We go to the local cemetery on Halloween, and we are all given particular characters who are interned at the cemetery, and we look up their lives and we study them a little bit, and we do our best to tell the story of that individual. And if we can look a little spooky at the time, of course, all the better. So, getting started, what does it take? My advice is from my own experience, there's just no substitute for reading and reading and read, and then you read some more. Watch out for the sources, of course. What is it you're reading? Make sure that, there are those, there's fiction and there's nonfiction. And then there's a whole bunch of things that kind of get blended in between. So again, I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about sources, but please keep that in mind. Be careful of the types of books you're reading. Study the period, study the people, study the religions, the trades, the dress, the music, the laws, and the issues. Now you might want to pick one of those areas and make that your focus. There are people who just talk about colonial dress. There are people who just do the trades. For example, I do a presentation of a colonial carpenter, and I have a large collection of colonial tools that I bring and display. It's just one of my personal hobbies. I did that just last weekend. Music, the same thing. Some people are into laws of the time. Some of your best resources are the court records, county records that go back into the 1700s. And different issues. Of course, there are, whether it be slavery or freedom in general or religion, there's just it's almost an endless list here of things that one can do. Now, do you need to choose a persona? Now, what is a persona? A persona is a specific person in history that you want to represent, that you want to portray to people. I have friends that do this. They have one thing that they do. They may do other things, but there's one particular character. It might be General John Stark, or it might be General Washington, or Hamilton, or Sam Adams, and that's what they do. But why do you find that person interesting? And if you're going to be doing this for the public, you have to find a way to make it interesting for the people you're talking to as well. So how famous is this person? The portrayal of this person limit you, maybe? You got to be careful. You got to think about that a little bit. If all you're going to do is talk about a person who no one has ever heard about before, might be perfectly fine, as long as he really has an interesting story. And usually that's the easy part, because you cannot write stories as good as real historical characters. What the people did during the colonial, and by colonial period I'm referring primarily to the French and Indian War, end of the war through the Revolution up to maybe up to 1800. These people were extraordinary people who did extraordinary things. And Hollywood tries to write good stories. In my opinion, if you go into the library and pull some of these biographies, you're not going to believe what you read. You can't say, no human being can do this. So, you don't have to have a persona. You may want to have a persona. I probably have about 12 of them. It depends. So, again, you just read about that person, so that if you are asked to present a particular person, you've got something that you can use. Here is a painting or a drawing of a colonial schoolmaster. So I have a whole presentation of that. Here I'm presenting a real person. He was a schoolmaster. His name was John Fowle from Woburn, Massachusetts. He had two famous students that went through his classroom. One was Colonel Baldwin, who crossed the Delaware River with Washington, and the other one was Benjamin Thompson, who was later known as Count Rumford. Perhaps you've heard that name. So it's a great story that I could never have written myself, but it's the real deal, and I'm portraying one of three characters there in the presentation. Over here, I'm just a sailor, a local sailor across the street at the museum festival. Now, buying and making, what do you need? Well, we already talked about clothes and glasses. Wigs. Wigs were very common in the 1700s. Did everybody have a wig? No. If you were wealthier, definitely. Do I have wigs? Of course. They're fun. So I have on the table some different examples. One thing that was used here up in the front by artisans. This is an artisan or a craftsman's hat, and it comes with a ponytail called a queue. Now, these things were just as stylish in those days as the different hair pieces that people wear today. It's all part of style, as were the wigs, anything like this. And there were different hairstyles. Some have no curls on the sides, like this one, but it has some curls in the back. Some have one curl, some have two curls on the side, some have three curls on the side. It was all about what you preferred to have. And then there was that whole story about Major Andre allegedly had this tiny little braid that came down the side. It was just a stylistic thing that they had. So wigs, I talked a little bit about shoes or perhaps boots. If you're portraying a soldier, you might want to have boots. Now, the boots in those days would come up sometimes way up to mid-thigh, and you could roll them over. Now, here's the 10-foot rule. Here's a piece of leather that is simply sewn around the top to make it look as if it was folded over. Get up close, you can tell it's not the real deal. I'm giving you my secrets here, I hope you appreciate it. So there's shoes and boots, stockings, head to toe. You need to cover everything, obviously. If you're going to do it, I suggest you do it right and you get off to the right start. It's much better to start off, put your emphasis on a good kit, a good set of clothes, and everything from there is like icing on the cake. Do you buy it or do you make it? Again, we talked about that a little bit already. How do I know what to get? Well, what to get, this is where your reading comes in. View the sources, view the period art. Might sound like a strange thing to do, but if you, instead of just Googling the internet as a whole, Google images. And you very often will see paintings from the period of what you're looking for. Paintings and diaries, court records, are probably your three main sources and most accurate sources, because a painter is not going to make up something in those days. He's going to paint what he saw. In the court records, of course, most courts kept pretty dubious records, so that's a very good source. And journals and diaries are really, really important things as well. Please don't trust the movies. Say, well, I saw it on TV, it must be true. Yeah, so is the evening newscast, right? Sometimes and sometimes not. So you're just going to be careful. Like everything else, check the sources. Where is it coming from? The best thing to do is if you see the same thing in a lot of places, you're maybe the ground is a little more solid. But again, I really encourage you to check the sources of where this is coming from. So, sources. There are associations. There's an organization I just learned about and joined just a few months ago called ALFAM. Let's see if I can remember what that stands for. The Association of Living Farms and Museums. So living museums are, okay? And that is, I'm finding out, is really a huge, huge source of people who really take this to the next level. Different historical societies, local historical societies, organizations, the Daughters of the American Republic, the military units. There are a lot of militias and British companies or French companies, you name it. If it existed in the period, somebody is reenacting them. Maybe not in your town, but somewhere around. Libraries, museums, the Peabody Essex Museum in Massachusetts is excellent, as well as many of them up here. Commercial entities, Townsend is one of the most advanced and well-supplied. I have a catalog here for reenactors, and it's primarily the colonial period. Jas Townsend and Company. It's now just going to Townsend and Sons or something like that, but they've got everything, and they have a huge YouTube library of films where things are explained. It can be cooking, foods, recipes, clothes, weapons. It just goes on and on and on. It's a wonderful research. Not the only one. There are many, many, many of them. You just have to keep digging and digging and digging. Unfortunately, there's not one place that you can go to as a reference. What you're getting today is probably 10 years worth of my looking around. It took me a long, and I'm still looking and still finding new sources. Yes?
Have you seen anything with the Townsend and Company? Have you seen anything where you looked in and you're like, I'm not sure if that's completely accurate, or do you think most of their stuff is relatively researched?
I have found it.
Like taking it with a grain of salt, you know?
No, I hear.
Yeah.
I would say it is very well researched.
Mm-hmm.
I have never found anything completely wrong. I have found things that some people on one end of the spectrum or the other might say, oh, well, you know. I will say it's more to the upper end. Their stuff is not real inexpensive. So another source, as I put on here, is eBay, because a lot of people like me exchange, and we move from one period to another, or we don't want this musket anymore, we want another one, so we'll sell that one. Or the canteen, or the bedroll, or the frying pan, or, you know, whatever that we're moving. Beware of costume and theatrical companies.
Yeah.
Okay, sometimes they can be very, their stuff can be low end, which is good. Some a mixture. I found one up here, thanks to my friend, right up here in Hampton, where I bought this wig. Now, it turns out they had 3 different wigs. They had a very inexpensive one, a medium end one, and a very expensive one. I went for the one in the middle because I'm mainstream. And
Looks good.
it, again, the 5-foot rule or 10-foot rule works for that. Now the other wig over here, that's a lesser expensive one. And if you notice, if there's one theme between my 3 wigs, the hair is all the same color. There's a reason for that.
What about your eyebrows?
Well, I can't get eyebrows online anymore. I used to, you know, but no. It's just the nature of my hair is that it came in kind of some is still dark. It hasn't all gone white. So some of it is white to the gray side. It used to be all gray, but then before that it used to be all brown. So where are you? Qualified vendors, or sutlers as we call them in the hobby. Sutlers are at festivals and encampments. Talk to the reenactors, people like me at events. They love to be asked questions. Don't ever be afraid to approach anybody you see at a festival or a reenactment, unless of course it's in the middle of a battle. You know. Get their opinions and suggestions. You can get contacts, ask them where they bought something that you really liked it. I do suggest you be positive in your questions and your criticisms. Be positive and constructive, but they love to, they're in it. The reason they're in it is to talk to people and to explain and to teach. There's many online sources for sewing patterns. If any of you are into sewing, you can get patterns for everything I'm wearing. You may be, they may be deep down the search list. So if you're looking for colonial patterns, you may have to dig a little deeper than.
And they're not like Vogue or those Butterick ones, that there are other sources more correct?
Yes, yes. Again, the cottage industry. Some of these companies, there are, and I'm pausing here because I just saw one last week and I can't remember the name of it, but that's really all they do. And it's something to do with sewing, the title of it. I don't know if Bill, you remember.
Townsend has patterns.
And Townsend has patterns,
Okay.
yes. But there are others too.
Yeah.
Just keep looking. And get recommendations. Most here's sort of like my bottom line. Most conversations with other reenactors or with reenactors can be and should be educational learning experiences for both of us. I can learn from you, I learn from other reenactors, and hopefully you can learn from me. And you never stop learning. The moment you think you know it all is the day you should stop doing it. Copy period art. Again, it's really difficult for you to see the pictures because of the lighting. These two on the left are paintings or watercolor drawings. On the right is the real deal, just last weekend. Down in Newburyport, Massachusetts, there was a huge encampment there. There were 23 colonial militia units who came. There were 13 British Army units who came. So there were several hundred participants, and something like 600 spectators showed up on Saturday. Many people, and that's not, it's the biggest one I have ever attended. I was there as a carpenter. Because they have the military units in the encampment where you can walk through and see all the campsites and the tents and how people cooked and what they did in the day when they were in an encampment. But they also had several tradesmen So we had a man who made everything out of horn, shoe horns, knife handles, powder horns, anything that was made out of animal horns. We had a tinsmith, and I was portraying a carpenter. Some you go to, there will be blacksmiths, there will be shoemakers, all kinds of artisans. And this is the time of year, folks. If you're interested, just watch your local newspapers, and you will find lots of things going on that you can attend.
You said that last one was where, I didn't catch where it was.
Newburyport.
Thank you.
Actually, I believe it was in the town of Newbury,
Yeah,
or as they say, Newbury.
yeah. Just south of Newbury.
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
Now, up until 1764, Newbury and Newburyport were part of the same town, including West Newbury. They were all one town. 64, Newburyport split off. It had been known as Waterside. It's right on the water. It was all merchants and shippers. And the rest of the town was all farmers. And they had very differing interests, so they split off, made their own town. And then in 1811, I think it was, West Newbury split off. Yes?
Now, is there a historical newsletter that you can follow this? Just because we're from Nashua and it's not a very, there's not a lot of reenactments going on in that area.
I'm surprised. Okay.
I'm too,
It's part of
I'm
the
involved in the
Dunstable,
historical
I'm sorry?
society.
It's part of Dunstable, what used to be known as Dunstable years, back in the golden era.
But I just more in the sense, more in the sense that, I'm with the Historical Society and there's not a lot of funding in that area, so,
I see.
plus it's a little bit more urbanized and it would be kind of hard to,
Sure.
have a natural walk.
Sure.
So, there's another resource.
That's my favorite question, because I don't know of one.
No, oh, okay.
I keep missing events. I say, oh, I
Same
wish
here,
I was here.
here on backwards. Yeah,
So all I can do is say, sign up for blogs,
Yeah.
historical blogs.
okay.
Sign up, Facebook, follow different Facebook, anything you see, just follow it. Any group you see that has a Facebook page, follow it, and then,
Yeah, try to keep it here.
Bill, do you know of any one place?
We try gun clubs, a lot of guys shoot black powder, they go to rendezvous. They reenact rendezvous depending on the time period.
Okay.
It's difficult, especially for the first time. Once you get your name into the hat,
Yeah,
it all starts to unravel, it's fine. It's finding the first step.
Yes.
yeah.
It's a little dicey, but once it goes, if you're really sincere, don't throw up your hands, just keep digging.
Yes.
And we're all posted somewhere,
Yeah.
everything we do. I mean, last weekend's event that we were both at was huge.
Mhm.
One of the biggest I've ever been to, but it was online, all for a month.
Yeah, oh, okay.
So,
Oh, so you're not supposed to-
And unless the event is actually in your town,
Yeah,
it's unlikely that you're gonna see it in a newspaper.
yeah.
That's true.
Okay, now it was all over the Newburyport
Yeah,
newspaper,
so, okay.
but it's not every town has a newspaper
Mhm.
nowadays. And so Newbury's somewhat sizable, and it was a big come-on for people, so yeah. And sometimes specific museums.
Is that annually on Memorial Day
this event?
weekend or the weekend?
The event I
before?
was at, no, it's not annually. The director told me that they're gonna try to do it every 2 years, maybe 3 years. Sometimes these events, if you do the same thing every year,
Yeah.
it loses some of its pop, I guess. I did the, what's wrong with this picture kind of thing, and you're not gonna be able to see it from where you're sitting. But this was my campsite, and if you look real close right here, I'm cooking some eggs. And I will say they were delicious. They were really good with bacon.
That's
But
not where they were.
as my friend Bill pointed out to me, the next thing I need to do to upgrade would be, do you see something in the picture?
No.
No, oh, I thought you were trying to catch my attention.
Is there a plastic handle on it?
Exactly. Yes, there's a plastic handle on the fry pan. Now, everything else, I've got a nice tin cup, and I've got a crockery mug, and I've got pewter plates, I've got period spoons and knife, and of course the eggs work just fine. So, but again, sometimes it's fun. Once you say, okay, there's something wrong with the picture, it sets your eye and your concentration or your focus. Now here I am with a couple of friends of mine. The fellow in the middle is the one that displays and performs work using animal horns, and the fellow on the right here is a tinsmith.
Is that house siding historical?
No, the house is very authentic. That is the Spencer Pierce farm. It's
That was
the
my-
oldest working farm, goes back into the 1600s
Looks like a
in
gutter.
Massachusetts. But no, in the three characters that you see here, is there anything in particular? And if you haven't seen it already, you're not going to see it. If you want to have a really feisty conversation with your reenactor, find one with a beard and ask him how authentic it is.
Oh, okay.
Now, we've all seen pictures of our founding fathers. Any of them have a beard?
Oh.
So, I have a ball with this conversation because I have had a beard probably for the last 20 years, okay? I think, Bill, you've had yours longer than I have.
I'm older than you, that's why.
But in any case, as reenactors, again, when you start cranking it up a notch and getting serious about it, what you see on my face, I now can get away with. It used to be a little bit longer and more in the shape of a goatee. But when I give a presentation or do a reenactment, I shave it down to about 1/16 of an inch. Because you get into the historical background, and what does it say? If you're in the British military, it's in the Army manual, you have to shave minimum once a week. You have to shave once a week. If you're in the colonial militia, there weren't any laws, except all of these sort of social mores were set by the local minister. And if you have to go to church, because it's a very Christian area, you got to go to church on Sunday, and he says, no beards in my church. Or you go to church on Sundays. But of course, shaving on the Sabbath is work, and you're not supposed to do anything like work on Sabbath, so Saturday night would be shaving time. So again, it comes down to pretty much once a week. It was the general practice that if you lived in a more civilized area versus the frontier, that you would be, by cultural norms, clean shaven during this period of time. Now, if you were French and Indian War and you came from more New Hampshire, away from the coast, you can make an argument, and that's what we all do. We make an argument for ourselves why it's okay for me to keep my beard, because I don't want to shave it off. I don't care what you say. And this is where it's hard to prove a negative, so the people can say, well, it just wasn't the social norm, and I can say, well, how do you know that the person I'm representing never had a beard? I can take you to a museum in Wolfboro, New Hampshire, where on the wall is this beautiful woven wreath on the wall, made from Grandpa's beard. When the man died, they memorialized him by taking his beard and weaving a beautiful wreath, and it's on the wall. Wigs were made from pig hair, but I can't have a beard? Really? Okay, so it's just what was at the time, and where you were, what time you were, what your job was. Now you go to the period art. As I said, that's a great source. Did painters ever paint a carpenter, a blacksmith, a tinsmith? Not that I've seen, maybe once or twice. So we really don't know for sure. A tradesman might be allowed to have a beard. So I go to Williamsburg and I got 1 million pictures up there. About 289 to be exact. And I found right away 6 tradesmen with beards. And I say, well, Williamsburg is a pretty hardcore kind of place. What's going on there? So I have an email going back and forth with a man who just came from Williamsburg, was on the staff there for many years, portraying their governor, clean shaven. And I'm trying to get his understanding of what it meant to have a beard in Williamsburg and what it might be up here. So again, I'm still learning. But what you're looking at here is probably as much of a beard as what the average male would have in a town like Exeter, the colony capital, in the 1770s, a 6-day growth. But it's a fun thing to get into a conversation with, isn't it, Bill? my bearded friend.
Well, the one thing too, with in the sense of safety, my father had worked with the Milford Drum and Fife Corps for a few years with my brother. He did drumming, and so my father was carrying a musket. During one of the events, they were actually allowed to fire the musket, and he learned why when you look, you turn away and you shoot, because he decided to look, Flint pretty much seared his whole eyebrows off. And he didn't realize that that was a thing because, you know, they were more in the sense just display.
Well, when I was trained with a musket, when that goes off, it's like 4th of July, 6 inches from your nose, okay? Your first instinct is to turn your head. But we were taught, no matter what, don't turn your head because you have to know if you've had a misfire or not,
Oh, okay.
That's true.
okay?
Yeah.
So you have, well, I want to know if I have a misfire and I don't want to explode my face. What do I do? So, and there are many different kinds of weapons. There's flash guards and I could talk about weapons all day. Dangers. If you want to hear some interesting story, talk about men and reenactors who are around cannon companies where they're firing cannons and the protocols that they have to go through with that too, regarding safety. All right, so why do I do what I do? Real quick, I'm just going to run down here. This is Amos Pearson. He was a carpenter, actually from Newburyport, born in 1749. Patriots Day, April 19th. The town of Newbury sounded the alarm. The British were coming. He took off with his militia for Lexington. Of course, it was too far away to actually get there in time. He followed the British into Boston. By the time they got to Boston, of course, the battle is over. The British are back in the town. Just a couple of months later, comes this thing called Bunker Hill. By the way, since the British were back in Boston, their unit was dismissed and they lived close enough, so they marched back to Newburyport. 2 months later, Battle of Bunker Hill, the alarm goes off again. They march down to the Battle of Bunker Hill. He fights in the Battle of Bunker Hill, is wounded, and he, not badly enough that he doesn't march all the way back to Newburyport again. Just about, roughly 2 years later is the Battle of Saratoga. He re-enlists again. This time he marches all the way to Saratoga, New York, so maybe 150 miles, marches. Fights in the battles there. A couple of months later, he is dismissed. It's December, and it's getting cold in New England, as it often does up here. He wants to get home in a hurry. They decide to make it a dedicated march, and they march every single day in a row, 7 days in a row, stopping only to sleep at night, averaging 27 miles a day. He gets back into Newburyport, and the very next day, he went back to work as a house carpenter. My favorite thing to do is to ask kids, if you would just march 27 miles a day for 7 days in a row, what would you do the next day you were home? I'd sleep, I'd go on vacation, I'd go to Disney World, I'd, whatever. And I said, no, not him. He immediately went back to work as a house carpenter. And it's interesting, if I can get this thing to come back on again, is that the very next year, he got married. So I think when he got back, and he was 29 at the time, or 28 at the time he went to Saratoga. When he was 29, he got married. So I think as soon as he got back, he had plans for the future, and he was probably working on his own house. And then he lived to the age of 90. And all of this I found just by reading a local history, a book on the history of Newburyport. The book is full of stories, as is a history of Exeter or any other town you might be from, Nashua, I'm sure. Okay, it's particularly being on the Merrimack. That should be a huge source for you, the Merrimack River.
Yeah.
So, my story. First, what is a hobby? To any of you, a hobby is something you do because you want to, it's because you love it, and hopefully because it's fun. Why do I have so many personas or different approaches? For the same reason, for the same definition of the word hobby. I just love doing it. It's fun. I'm just grateful I can approach this hobby from so many different angles. Whatever you get enjoyment from, because you're not going to make any big bucks doing this, believe me. Most of it's going to be volunteer. So if you're looking for a hobby, no matter what it is, it doesn't have to be reenacting. Find something that you love to do and just get into it and have fun doing it. How did I get into it in the first place? We can blame my wife for that. She was an elementary school teacher. And she was teaching lessons on the colonial period. And she said, how'd you like to come in and talk to my class? And that's how it started. I took a day off from work, and that's when I discovered, I said, gee, what do I want to do? And also, retirement was sort of on the horizon for me. So I said, what do I want to do in my retirement? I am not a couch potato. That's just not the type of person I am. Some people are, and that's fine if that's what you like to do. Not me. So I said, what can I do? Well, I made that, that list, and I suggest you do it if you haven't done it yet. What are the things you like to do? If you're going to spend the rest of your life doing it, in retirement, or even if you're young folk and you're getting involved in this, what do you like doing? Make a list. So I said, well, I was involved in some local community theater, so costuming is fun, or can be. I was a former teacher, so I enjoy working with kids. I'm a musician, so I love playing music. And most importantly, I love history. Particularly, for some reason, I've read a lot of history about different periods. It's the Revolution that lights my fire. I just find it the most fascinating period ever. From the time the French and Indian War ended, when we were all on the same side, fighting a common enemy, to 10 years later turning our weapons on each other. That's an amazing period of time. That's an amazing period of time. Some really wonderful reading to be had there. So that's what got me into this. I will find another way to do this next time, I promise. And actually, if you look at the word history, I'd like to point out the word that it's all about stories. The word story is in there. The story of Amos Pearson. I don't know anybody who doesn't like a good story. Do you? Have you ever met somebody that doesn't like a good story?
Yes, it was weird.
Yeah, I think it probably would be. In my relatively long life, it seems like everybody likes a good story. That's why people watch TV, or they read books, or they listen to comedians on stage. I mean, songs. They're all stories. History is just full of stories. So if we can get to be a part of that, I think that's great. So in coming close to conclusion here, every reenactor, in my opinion, is part historian, part actor, whether you want to be or not, part entertainer, and certainly all educator. Because no matter what you do, somebody's going to learn something from what you're doing. And whether that's your intention or not, that's really what's going to happen. So that pretty much concludes my presentation for you right now. I hope I haven't gone over time. I haven't been looking. What time is it?
Yes.
Ooh, closer than I
You
thought.
made it. Good job.
So I am open for some questions if you would like. I have some things on the table I can quickly show you. And if you excuse me, I'm going to wet my whistle.
Yes.
Gee, I do have a couple of whistles, but I didn't bring them with me. I just grabbed some various and sundry things. Men wore garters. So the socks that I'm wearing that go up over your knees, they don't always stay up over your knees. These are called gaiters. If you did not have boots, remember where these men were marching? They were marching through bushes and brambles and briars and such. This would protect, if not your ankles, it certainly would protect your very nice socks from the thorns. I showed you my artisan hat. These could be sailor socks, but I have heard that these are really not authentic. The horizontal stripes, they came in a later period of time. Townsend does sell these. So again, that question about how accurate they are or not, again, it depends who you want to talk to, I suppose.
Sure. Okay.
I did find one book on reenacting. It's called Who Was I? I was going to say Who Am I? Who Was I? The author is Kathy Johnson. I see you taking notes there. A Modest Guide to the Hows and the Whys. It's really the only thing I have seen, but it's really quite good. It's not huge, but it has a lot of pictures and definitions and such. I showed you the Townsend catalog, and I'm not here shilling for them. It's a good source for me. The pants I'm wearing came from Townsend. The socks, these socks. Not to say you cannot, if you use the 5-foot rule studiously, you can be practical. very practical, if you, particularly like me, if you want to have multiple outfits. You can swap out different clothes, because they weren't big into matching. Okay, so you can swap out things. Today, we would never put certain colors together. They did in those days. All right, so one thing I did is that I had a presentation. I showed you where I was a schoolmaster, and he had two famous students. Well, one was a Tory and worked for the British. Well, when I started talking about the other fellow, I simply turned the vest inside out, and now I can be a patriot because it's a nice navy blue on the other side. Okay, so you can get two vests for the price of one. All you need is to know how to make a buttonhole and get another set of buttons. All right, so you can do that. Sometimes you can, I have another vest that I purchased, and it turned out just being way too tight on me, so I simply went up the back and stitched in a piece of fabric in the middle, and I made it a couple of inches bigger. Nobody's ever going to see that because you always wear a coat. But I know that because it was custom in the day that a man never went outside without his coat. This was a waistcoat, but it's pronounced waistcoat. And then these are our trousers, and no zippers, no Velcro. Everything was buttons, lots and lots and lots of buttons everywhere. Which is fine for them, but lousy for me, because I have to carry a sewing kit in my haversack, as they did, because buttons tend to fall off. But a trick, if you're getting into this, find the heaviest thread that you can find, so when you sew them on, they're not going to pop off easily.
I feel like everything I hand sew like falls apart after like as I'm wearing it.
This is an interesting book that I found, and it's the reporting of the Revolutionary War as found in newspaper articles. But just like today's news, you know, you have to read it with a jaundiced eye and question all sources and perspectives. It was probably worse during the colonial period. So what is really useful in colonial newspapers, are you looking for the author?
Yeah.
Todd Andrew. I can't pronounce it. His first name is Todd with two D's. Andrlik.
Andrick.
Okay. But what's really a good source, if you read the advertising sections of colonial newspapers, in the ads, there is so much history and descriptions of what they did. You want to find out about taverns, you want to find out people's descriptions. Somebody's got a runaway slave. There's going to be a great description of that slave because he wants him back. What he's wearing, right? How tall he is, what his hair was like, what color eyes he had, all of that.
So wanted posters are a good thing.
Like a wanted poster, okay? Broadsides are another thing, yeah. But exactly. So again, a good source, but be careful what you're reading and understand. This is a calendar, just to remind me that Townsend, if you just subscribe to them, they'll send you a nice calendar. I don't need a calendar. I've got all of that in my magic glass, right? But what they have in here are pictures and recipes. Each month is a different recipe, and it's beautiful. Color glossy, I mean, just really nice historical things there.
Yeah.
What else do I have? Sailors would wear a cap, and sometimes tradesmen, a knit cap. This is called a Monmouth cap. Sometimes you'll see it with a tassel.
What is that one?
Yes. The gloves, they would always cut the fingertips off, so they would be able to use, well, if they were a fifer, or they really use their fingertips and have some, good dexterity using a flintlock or whatever. I showed you the gaiters. This is a sailor's hat. This is from colonial period and a little bit after. It's called a skimmer. The ribbons, I have a selection of ribbons because on sailor hats and on ponytails, simply style on ponytails. But if it's on a skimmer, that's how the captain knew what ship you were from. Everybody in your ship had the same color ribbon. So you go into a tavern, he knew where his crew was.
Oh, wow.
Probably on the bottom of the pile.
I just thought that
Stay on the barrel.
all friends that know each other really well.
This is called a hunting frock. And again, I bought this used. Sometimes reenactors get together and one or two people actually dabble in trading things and selling things and reselling things. A hunting frock, it's a waterproofed with paraffin perhaps and certain types of oils, Bill? Waterproofing?
Almost everything leaked back then, so.
It didn't matter.
Is that linen?
They will wax it, yeah.
Is that linen?
This is cotton. It's like canvas.
Okay.
A lot of things are made of canvas, particularly like the pants I have. It's 100% cotton, canvas. Sailors on, ever wonder what they did with old sails? Source of fabric. They made clothes out of, okay? So these are called slops. Very much like culottes, I think ladies have. They're just baggy shorts down just below the knee. Most of the time they'd be barefooted, no shoes on deck. Lightweight work shirt, this would be tradesmen and sailors as well. And very often, again, they would tie something around their neck to serve as, if it's working outside and it's hot, to wipe your brow with. The sailor hats would have pine pitch on them. Of course, where does someone today get a hat like that? Well, you can, really. Haven't seen any actually sold, but you can buy simple straw hats. Okay, simple straw hats. You take out the red, white, and blue ribbon that goes around the top, and they had straw hats. They were straw hats, except they were covered with pine pitch or tar. Okay,
So that's black, not navy can.
correct. It's black.
Thanks.
From my Rust-Oleum spray paint can. Okay, you just spray painted it. So again, we do our best. You look at the pictures, you know what it was made out of, but you got to be practical and realistic and say, I'm not going to go boil down some pine pitch, and I'm just not going to do that. They actually would use the pine pitch as well, and it would be all over their shoulders, so like a combination sunscreen and bug repellent, and they'd have it in their hair, because it was constantly getting soaked, and out in the sun and the salt. Again, it was all practical, but you learn all these little details from reading. And of course, the wealthier you were, the fancier your clothes would be. Why? Because you could afford to. All right, now a common school teacher or an artisan or just more of a common man would be dressed in simple outfit like this.
So I was trying to figure out what fabrics. Is
Um,
that cotton also?
This is a type of cotton, I don't know the exact name of it, because what they did do in those days is they did blend a lot of fabrics together.
Really?
They would blend cotton and linen
Okay.
in different amounts for different purposes.
How about
But so they had three basic fabrics that they used. It was cotton, wool, and linen. Linen, of course, comes from flax, and they make that at home. And you see the spinning wheels today. If it's a small one, it's probably for making linen. If it's a big one, it's for making wool.
Your vest is?
This is wool.
Wool.
Almost like a felt. I don't think this was never intended to be the outside. Remember, this is reversible, so when it was made for me, it was a beautiful navy blue. And I said, gee, what a beautiful lining you put on this. Gee, if I just add some nice silver buttons on there, yeah. So anyway, I try to be practical. I don't want to take up your afternoon. I'm willing to stay a little bit longer and answer some questions if you like. That's pretty much it. I think I've touched upon it. Anybody have? Yes.
So for your glasses, how
Yes.
how did that work with? I'm assuming they're prescription. So how did you go about
It's so much simpler than I ever would have imagined. Eventually, you get a new pair of glasses.
Yeah.
What do you do with the old ones?
Oh, I keep them. Throw them on the cliff.
Okay. Generally, you say, oh, I may need these someday, and you put them in a drawer, never to be used again.
Okay, that's the truth.
Take them to your local optics shop,
Yeah.
glass making place, your old glasses, and buy a set of empty frames from Townsend
Okay.
or other places online, and just say, can you cut these lenses and put them in here?
Oh, that's awesome.
Okay, so just in
They did it for $30.
Really?
They did it for $30.
Oh, that's wonderful.
The frames weren't that expensive. These are really kind of interesting frames. I had never seen them before. They actually fold.
Oh, nice. Okay. Very compact.
Oh, that's even
Isn't
better.
that neat?
They're tiny too.
Of course, the problem then is being able to see them well enough to unfold them.
Yeah.
We should tell
Any
them
other questions?
about those.
We
Yes.
have a set that's similar, that slide, the sides slide together.
These
Same
people
era?
could be. I'm not an expert on eyewear, but probably. They were incredibly clever, much more clever than we would ever give them credit for. We get very arrogant and think that we invented everything today or yesterday. The only thing we've invented in the last 200 years is electricity and how to use it, make motors, and the internal combustion engine to make more motors. So we've learned how to do things more easily. Are we doing new things? Yeah, some maybe, but they were already doing everything. They were building houses, picking them up and moving them across town. Really. And they did it all the time. Beautiful, beautiful houses. The houses we build today are really not much prettier or better built. Do they have better wiring? Yeah, because they had no wiring at all. Better heating? Of course, because they had no heating at all except a huge fireplace. So you get my drift. Don't ever underestimate what they did back in the day. Anything else?
How long is your range of what you reenact? I know you were mentioning the French and Indian Wars. Do you reenact Civil War or just like?
No,
What do you do?
no, I don't do Civil War. I've read a lot about the Civil War, and I find it fascinating. Again, another unbelievable, and millions of unbelievable stories. But for me, it's the early phases of the American Revolution. Once the Continental Army is formed under George Washington, I begin to drift out a little bit. I really love that period between the French and Indian War and the very early part of the American Revolution. And every historian you talk to, if you ask them, when did the American Revolution begin, they'll give you a different date. That's because of so much was going on in that 10-year period.
Yeah.